Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here at KAKM for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. On satellite, got a system moving northward here, actually several bands pushing northward. The next one here will be coming up later tonight and tomorrow, spreading more rain and some gusty winds into that area. Areas of clouds here coming up into south central Alaska, bringing some precipitation. Heaviest precipitation today occurring down along the southeast coast with just under half an inch falling at Ketchikan, or at Annette in the last 24 hours, contrasting with about 8,300s up at Juneau. And the heaviest amount here occurred at Yakutat, 1.68 inches falling. Had some moisture here moving up toward the North Gulf Coast, rolling this again. Started out pretty good here, but got a trough back here to the west, actually an Arctic front right through here, spreading snow into the Kuskokwim Valley, followed by much colder temperatures sweeping down from the northwest. The main low center pulling northward there across the Seward Peninsula. East to southeast winds, 15 to 30 miles per hour here across the northwest, gusted as high as 40 miles per hour or more up along the western Arctic coast at Point Lay. And a fair amount of snow with this, known picking up anywhere from 3 to 5 inches over the last 24 hours, with some snow extending actually from the Bering Strait across in this low cloud deck all the way down off the coast, and that pulling inland, some snow showers here along the Alaska side of the Alaska Peninsula, and in toward Unalaska, temperatures falling into the mid-20s there across the Pribilof Islands. And rolling this by again, clouds generally shifting northward here across the North Slope and the Arctic coast, but the main low center not all that visually obvious here. It shows up a little better with the surface plot right about there earlier today, with the front extending over into the Kuskokwim Valley where rain and snow say at Sparavon. That'll be changing over to snow if it hasn't already, with the much colder temperatures falling into the single numbers here back over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and that's spreading southward. And then this trough with the moisture and clouds, kind of breezy, but not too bad. East to southeast, 15 to 25 miles an hour here, with areas of rain again across the southeast coast. Some of that moisture pulling northward, brought some light snow to Nabesna and into the Northway area. For tonight, that pattern will generally persist here, and kind of hit and miss on the snowfall. Mostly showery type precipitation over the Copper River Basin, the Alaska Range, and more of a solid band here coming up to the western Alaska Range. That's where the heaviest snowfall will be, on the western slopes there, and then back around to the northwest. Winter weather advisory out this evening until 9 p.m. for the western Arctic coast. Mostly Point Lay on down to Cape Lisburne, with those gale force winds also out this evening here for the coastal areas. Gusts to 50 miles per hour out of the east, and snow and blowing snow keeping the visibilities low at times, but that should improve later this evening. And of course, that advisory due to end at 9 p.m. Areas of east winds, lighter winds, and maybe some flurries off to the east there, but mostly dry up here over the northeast. Showery, mixed precipitation showers along the North Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle. And then this area of rain slowly beginning to spread northward and push back into the southern areas of the Panhandle. Weak high pressure out here should dry it out behind the front, but there may not be a whole lot of clearing, and kind of some flurries or showers persisting, especially along the coast here, kind of another band gathering and getting caught up in southwesterly flow, both at the surface and aloft. Most of that, though, will be pulling off to the northeast. This front will be weakening as it moves eastward. And then another system out here spreading snow into the western Aleutians. Mixture of conditions, but light, not much in the way of wind spreading into the central areas. Light winds for the eastern Aleutians tonight, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And then for tomorrow, you can see this front falling apart now as it attempts to jump the Alaska Range, but some moisture may get into the Susitna Valley, possibly. More likely, though, up through the central Tanana Valley, back toward the Brooks Range, slowly pulling eastward there. So look for the ceilings visibilities to start falling there for the Koyukuk Valley later tomorrow. And throughout the day, that's slowly pulling eastward. And then the low back here, kind of circulating surges of showers or snow in toward the Alaska or the Seward Peninsula, and some snow showers extending down across Nunivak Island and the southwest coast, to a greater extent along the Yukon Delta coast, and to a lesser extent here over the Kuskokwim Delta down into Bristol Bay. Lingering snow showers along the Aleutian Range, mostly the western slopes and the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Possible showers, light snow showers with mostly cloudy conditions for the eastern Aleutians. And then that front progressing eastward, but again, that one even falling apart. Could bring some light snow into the central areas. A lot of snow showers following behind. And for the Panhandle, that low shifting northward here off the coast, and look for periods of rain across mainly the central and southern areas, staying dry to the north. But in time, that moisture should spread northward. And so looking for conditions, marginal VFR conditions, possibly late in the day, spreading northward, but should stay south of Lynn Canal with actually looking like a pretty good day, at least no precipitation here from Elephant Cove to Yakutat and the southeast interior, and should be pretty dry with some clearing here across all of the eastern interior right up to the eastern Arctic coast. And then the outlook for Monday is for mostly clear, staying dry in that general area, and then some moisture exiting the southeast coast, but another system approaching from the southwest. So rain or snow in the southern areas, chance of snow showers to the north, best chance early in the day, diminishing in the afternoon as that system approaches. And south central Alaska here, mostly cloudy, chance of snow for Cook Inlet as well as Prince William Sound. And the Chugach Mountains, lesser amounts for the Madanuska Valley, probably the Susitna Valley, not seeing much, just some scattered snow showers along the Alaska Range, and mostly clear and dry with light winds over the north central interior out to the Arctic coast. This moisture now up and off the coast. May get a few skips of snow on the eastern areas there from Barter Island to Demarcation Point, but that's about it, and that will be light, whatever does fall, and a general area of snow just catching the Cape Lisburne, Point Hope areas, possibly areas southwest of Point Lay, but that's going to mostly extend through the Bering Strait across St. Lawrence Island and then all the way down to the Pribilofs, but just in the form of some occasional light snow showers, maybe Nunivak Island. Pretty nice conditions for Monday here, hopefully along the southwest coast into Bristol Bay. Isolated showers for the eastern Aleutians, and that'll extend actually right out across the Aleutian chain, but the main difference or change will be those winds will be increasing during the afternoon out of the east and east-southeast, mostly for the eastern Aleutians over to about Adak, and lesser on the increase in the winds for the western areas due to that system that's down to the south. On the temperature map today, temperatures mostly in the 40s across the southeast coast with mid-40s over the southern Panhandle to right around 40 at Skagway, upper 30s, lower 40s for the North Gulf Coast, and 16 degrees reported at Gulkana, lower 30s over northern Cook Inlet to upper 20s in the Susitna Valley, Kodiak Island, lower 40s. Have a temperature range from 5 above at Fairbanks to 21 at Delta, 9 degrees over at Eagle, it's 7 at Fort Yukon. Along the Arctic coast, all below zero there until you get down to Cape Lisburne, where it was 4 above, but Barrow at -8, -3 over at Barter Island, Kaktovik, Dead Horse -9, Atchison at 8 below. Not a bad day here temperature-wise, but got gusty winds and some snow. Kotzebue and Buckland both at 29 degrees at 4 p.m., while Selawik at 25, 16 at Shishmaref, 17 at Nome, and 11 at Unalakleet, 18 degrees. McGrath, and also down at Sleepmute with temperatures down to or just under 10 degrees out along the coastline there. And then you can see the position of the front here with the contrast of temperatures from west to east, coming right up to the Alaska Range. Sparivon at 34 degrees, with Bethel down to 17, 16 at Makoriak. And for the Pribilof Islands, down into the mid-20s today with, that looks like St. George at 26, probably not too much different at St. Paul. Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s, lower 40s, mid to upper 30s out over the Aleutians. And for the forecast lows tonight, below zero, north slope in the Arctic coast, but nothing much colder than 20 below, with positive side of zero south of the Brooks Range, except for the upper Yukon Valley. Fort Yukon, forecast drop to 5 below, and getting right around zero here over the southwest interior, with some areas dropping a little below zero. Otherwise, mid-20s to lower 30s, south central Alaska, and mid-30s for the North Gulf Coast, and in the 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle, upper 20s, lower 30s for the Aleutians. Excuse me. And for tomorrow, Sunday, highs upper 30s to mid-40s for the southeast coast, and mostly in the lower to mid-30s for the North Gulf Coast, south central Alaska. Teens in the Tanana Valley, cooler yet up toward the Brooks Range, 10 degrees for Anaktuvik, and generally staying below zero for the Arctic coast and North Slope, with mid-teens for St. Lawrence Island, upper 20s there along the southwest coast, and temperatures ranging from the lower 30s there for the Pribilofs and the western Aleutians, otherwise milder down across the central and eastern areas. For flying weather, a marginal VFR spreading northward here. Didn't see any forecasts of IFR, but possibly here along the southern coast could be some areas of IFR, but generally looking at marginal conditions coming northward. So northern areas looks like they'll stay VFR throughout the afternoon, and marginal VFR here, Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai Peninsula, possible IFR up along the North Gulf Coast from, say, Cordova into the Sound, and then also IFR possible along the Alaska Range here and in the Susitna Valley. That tending to diminish throughout the afternoon as that frontal system weakens, and then some IFR bands here along the southwest coast and Arctic coast, areas of marginal VFR with some possible IFR, and a heavier area right from the Bering Strait down to St. Lawrence Island. Of course, out over the Bering Sea, much more in the way of IFR. For the passes, Anaktuvik, VFR diminishing to marginal as that frontal boundary comes eastward, and the same forecast for Adigan, maybe a little slower, but generally look for a downward trend in conditions throughout the day tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR gradually improving to marginal VFR, and that same forecast good for rainy as well. Lowest conditions in the morning, better in the afternoon as the front falls apart, and for windy, marginal VFR at times. Isabel, though, VFR eastern Alaska Range looking pretty good, not seeing too much effect. Mentasta also VFR, both entrances. Tanita, marginal VFR, both east and west. And then for Portage, marginal VFR could be a little better on the western entrance, but probably not VFR. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Looking at the freezing levels, at the surface here up north of the Pribilofs, at least that's the forecast for late tonight. Probably, I think it'll be south of the area there with at the surface right along the coastline here, 2,000 feet now, restricted all the way down over the southern southeast coast. And icing, got one band again with the main Arctic front here coming in from the west. Possible areas of mostly of the light, isolated, moderate Reimer mixed varieties here, also into Prince William Sound, scattered stuff out to the back and out to the west, and then a couple of bands out over the southern Bering Sea, maybe affecting the Aleutians. And this probably the main area here, spreading northward, probably won't get this far north tomorrow afternoon, but definitely into the southern and central areas. We'll see the best chances of some icing. Again, freezing level to about 9 to 10, maybe 11,000 feet. And the winds aloft showing southwest flow, not all that strong here, only 30 knots at 33,000 feet. The stronger jet down farther to the south, and then flow coming down around this upper level trough here. So we basically have southwesterly flow aloft from the southwest coast into south central Alaska, but it's very weak, and so that front really losing any upper support as it pushes eastward. And at 9,000 feet, very weak low here just northwest of Iliamna Lake, and a trough extending southward, light south to north flow along the North Gulf Coast there. 25 knots here, St. Lawrence Island blowing in toward the Seward Peninsula, and could see some easterlies up to 30 knots here for the Arctic coast, kind of hanging on to the pattern we see today, but that all tending to diminish, and stronger winds mostly south of the southeast coast, 30 to 40 knots. One band kind of coming up around just west of Prince of Wales Island, about 30 knots. Southwesterlies 15 to 30. Aleutians with the strongest band here from the central Aleutians, extending up toward the Pribilofs, but really not all that strong. And 3,000 feet, much the same pattern here. Southwesterlies 25, maybe as high as 30 knots, with one branch continuing in along the Yukon Delta coast, Norton Sound, but really dropping off. Light winds over the interior. Easterlies 20 to 25 knots again, western Arctic coast. Lighter, more variable on the east side, and kind of a really light wind pattern here for the North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska. Again, the strongest winds south of, or from Dixon Entrance southward, more likely across the Queen Charlottes. Turbulence-wise, not a whole lot. Maybe some light to isolated moderate chop, extreme southern southeast coast, pretty smooth everywhere else. Possible light stuff here up over the northwest, and maybe in and around the Pribilofs. And after the break, I'll be back to look at the marine forecasts.
Each year, millions of outdoor enthusiasts get a jump start on the boating season. For fishermen, hikers, campers, and other recreationists, the first few days of spring-like weather are the signal that it's time to launch their boats on a favorite lake, stream, or river. Whether a canoe, a john boat, skiff, car topper, or other small craft, these boaters tend to think more about the size of the fish in the lake than about being safe boaters. And all too often, this all-too-casual approach can lead to tragic consequences. After a long winter, it was exactly the kind of day that Jake McDermott and Rudy Bellows were waiting for. A chance to get back out on the lake, break out the rods and a few beers. Maybe even catch a fish or two. Jake McDermott, 43, father of two, the service manager at a local car dealer. His high school friend and fishing partner, Rudy Bellows, a 35-year-old bachelor and a sales manager for an auto parts distributor. Around noon, they paddled out toward the middle of the lake to try their luck at a favorite spot. The air was warming up, but the water temperature was still around 50 degrees. Jake knew the fish held close to the submerged tree and ended up snagging his lure on one of the branches. One last good tug, and he might pull it free. According to Bellows' statement to the police, when Jake first fell in, he didn't think it was a serious situation. But after a few seconds, he realized that his friend was floundering and needed help, fast. But when he lost his balance and fell in, he told us he was immediately disoriented and could barely stay afloat. In the end, it was all he could do to save himself. Jake McDermott drowned just a few yards from his capsized boat in about 8 feet of water. A tragic accident? Of course, they always are. But a freak accident? Far from it. In fact, everything about Jake McDermott's drowning, from where it happened to what caused it, is typical of the vast majority of fatal boating accidents that happen every year. If that sounds surprising, well, that's part of the problem. You see, contrary to popular belief, the typical accident doesn't involve a large offshore boat floundering in high seas and gale force winds. The circumstances in which most fatal accidents occur are far less dramatic. Instead of big water, the typical accident happens inland, on lakes and rivers, the small ponds and streams. And in more cases than not, it's the non-traditional boater who's involved. Fishermen, hunters, campers, people who are likely to be on the water in the spring or the fall months. And usually it's small boats, 16 feet or less, either with no motor or one of 10 horsepower or less. Almost half of all boating fatalities happen in broad daylight and in flat, calm conditions. And most of the time, the boat isn't even underway. Thanks, Jim. Of course, no two boating accidents are exactly alike, but in all too many cases, the common denominator is alcohol. In fact, 60% of all boating deaths are somehow alcohol-related. Part of the problem is that drinking while boating is almost a tradition. The one item you can bet will be on board is a cooler full of beer. But when out in a boat, the alcohol in just 2 or 3 drinks can significantly affect your balance, your vision, your judgment, and your ability to react quickly in case of an emergency. And don't for a minute fall for the myth that beer or wine is any less intoxicating than hard liquor. A can of beer or a glass of wine contain the same amount of alcohol as a shot of whiskey. It doesn't take much alcohol to affect your coordination, and even the slightest sense of unsteadiness can transform small boats like these into highly unstable and dangerous platforms. Under no circumstances should a boat be overloaded or overpowered, and a small boat is no place to stand up. If you have to change positions, keep a low profile and keep your weight centered toward the middle of the boat. Falling out of a boat is always an embarrassing and very often an unpleasant experience. But for the boater who's been drinking, an unexpected plunge could prove deadly. It may be hard to believe, but the inebriated person whose head is underwater can become so disoriented as to swim downward to their death rather than to the surface and safety. You know, the real tragedy of practically every boating-related drowning is that it could have been easily prevented. Wearing a personal flotation device, a PFD, is by far the single most important safety measure you can take when boating. It's a point we've been stressing for years and one that simply cannot be overemphasized. Look at it this way. Virtually every single boating-related drowning could be eliminated if the victim had been wearing a PFD. It's a time of the year when most boats have long since been hauled out of the water. But for more than 2 million waterfowlers in North America, it's the start of their boating season. Some may use a duck boat to head out to a water blind. For others, their boat may be nothing more than a dinghy used to set out decoys. In either case, these boaters operate in one of the most hostile boating environments of all, near freezing water.
Welcome back. Winds not too strong tomorrow, but contrasted from south to north. The system coming up south to southeast, 20 knots or so here over the southern areas. To the north, more of a northerly direction in the 15 to 20 knot range, but small craft advisories the entire stretch of the coastline here due to the seas that are above 7 feet. And then for Monday, lighter wind conditions, light and variable up here on the north coast, westerly to southwesterly 15 to as high as 20 knots there, blowing into Prince of Wales Island. A more southerly direction over the southern inside waters, and then southeast 15 to, oh, I'll just call it 15 knots, and then lighter winds for Lincoln Canal kind of trending to the north or from the north. And for Cook Inlet, northwesterlies at 10, north of the Forelands to a north wind south, and then northwesterlies maybe as high as 20 knots for Kamishak Bay. But generally a west-northwest wind that's barely a breeze here for Kodiak Island, and light northwesterlies, Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. And then for Monday, swing the directions around here, south, light southerlies there for the east side of Kodiak, and southeasterlies at about 15, taking a more easterly direction for the central and eastern Gulf Coast, and light northeasterlies or variable, light and variable for Prince William Sound. And Bristol Bay north at 20, Northeast here 15, but light and variable on the Pacific side of the peninsula, northwest 20, Sitkinak to Sand Point. And then northeasterlies only at 10 knots the following day on Monday. Same thing for Bristol Bay. Southeasterlies developing here 15 to as high as 20 knots or so on the Pacific side. And then for the Aleutians, south to southwest 15 to 20 knots, all areas tomorrow. And Monday, small craft advisories show up here for portions of the eastern Aleutians. Again, mostly on the southern area due to the system is farther to the south. Lighter winds to the north and west. Northeast 20 for the western zone. And the southwest coast, 15 to 25 knots. Small craft advisories here to the north. Southwest 20 for the Pribilofs. And Monday, stronger winds, southeast 25 to 30 knots. So brisk wind advisories up in this area. Small craft advisories for the northern Bering Sea. Lighter winds, 15 to 20 knots to the south. Arctic coast, all easterly with the strongest winds. Again, the gales ending this evening here on the west side, but maybe some brisk wind advisories hanging in through most of the day tomorrow, and lighter winds back to the east. Generally the same pattern on Monday, but another low possibly coming northward could bring some gales back in, first to the Chukchi Sea here and then spreading up to the north with brisk wind advisories on the western coast, staying light on the east side. For tonight, a weakening front heading eastward with some light snow, and then this area moisture pushing northward into the Panhandle will spread even farther to the north, but won't make it to the northern areas. This front falling apart here as it tries to cross the Alaska Range, staying a little more together up to the north, and that low center keeping it snowy and unsettled over in the northern Bering Strait. This system really weakening and dissipates, and then that low center could bring some gales back to the northwest coast. During the day Monday, chance of snow, southern Alaska, and other system approaching the Panhandle.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.